Hello everyone and welcome back to Carlton Carnivores. I've got another species spotlight for you guys today, and continuing with the Indo-Chinese Nepenthes theme. This one, just like the last species that we featured, thorelii, is a rather rare and very locally endemic species, although in this case a little bit more locally endemic since its populations are located in a very, very small area rather than spread apart as thorelii's were. This is Nepenthes suratensis, a beautiful kind of fat-pictured species endemic to Surat Thani province in Thailand. There are only two small populations known for this species. Neither of them are in a protected region either, so they're extremely at risk of extinction right now because there's no protection from land development or poaching or anything like that. And this is still a very rare species in cultivation too, so there is a lot of interest from people in taking this plant out of the wild, unfortunately. This species grows from roughly 0 to 200 meters in elevation, so sea level to about 600-700 feet in elevation, a very warm lowland environment. They grow in kind of sandy, open spaces, much like a lot of their relatives, because this is, like many of the other species in Indochina, it is a pyrophytic species, adapted to areas that have extreme seasons, wet and dry seasons, and adapted to grow very quickly. A lot of this growth that you see here is all developed within, give or take, the past year or so, and then designed to flower, set seed, and then die back as the dry season hits to a very, very thick tuberous rootstock. Now, this species is very, very similar also, of course, to a lot of its relatives. All the Indochinese species tend to be divided from each other by very minute differences in their structure, the hairs that cover them, and so on. This species develops very elongate, thin, lanceolate leaves, which you can see here. They are wider when it's new growth. Very young leaves will tend to have a bit wider profile, but then as it grows into a vine, those leaves tend to elongate out into these very thin linear lanceolate leaves. And this species tends to have a very, very short layer of hairs that covers the whole plant as it first starts to grow. One of its closest relatives I've already featured before is Nepenthes kongkandana, which has a persistent indumentum, a persistent covering of hairs that stays on pretty much all parts of the plant throughout its life. In suratensis, though, that thin covering of hairs rather readily falls off a lot of the plant. So the tops of the leaves, on the pitchers, the stem, the hairs will often fall off as the parts of the plant age. And so you get the tops of the plant tend to be relatively hairy and such, but then the lower leaves become glabrous because the hairs are caducous. They fall off over time. The pitchers can grow, mine are not particularly huge right now, but they can grow to about 6 to 8 inches tall in some cases, and tend to be rather distinctly subglobose in shape. So the pitchers, they're not quite rounded like, say, thorelii is, but they're also not like bulbous in the bottom, cylindrical up above, usually like kongkandana is. They're kind of right in the middle. So kind of ovoid throughout, or fat cylindrical, and they have a midrib that is usually either at or above the middle point of the pitcher. That goes up to a very, very rounded mouth with a little bit of a neck, but not a whole lot, which again distinguishes it from like kongkandana, which has more of a teardrop-shaped mouth. Coloration is somewhat variable, but is usually within kind of this lovely reddish coloration that you see on these plants here, or on this plant. reddish with a little bit of mottling. That mottling can either be brighter or darker depending on the individual plant and the background coloration of the pitchers. If it's a lighter colored pitcher, that mottling might be a lot more noticeable. And so those are the lower pitchers. I unfortunately have not yet gotten to see upper pitchers on these guys, but they are pretty similar to most Indo-Chinese species in that they are kind of thin and funnel shaped at the very bottom of the pitcher and then tubular, cylindric above. So a very tall, thin type pitcher that they produce when they start climbing. And again, this is a species adapted to drought conditions, so you'll see those rosette pitchers formed early on, and then within a few months the plant is usually vining tall enough to start producing upper pitchers, which I'm hoping my plant will start showing very soon after I get it repotted. Once those upper pitchers are formed, it will flower and set seed. The flowers are usually relatively tall stalks as well. These guys tend to put it way above like all the surrounding grasses that they grow in, and then set seed, and then it dies back if the drought is really persistent or if a fire comes through to survive in its tuberous rootstock. Like other Indo-Chinese species, it tends to like it warm. So temperatures of 75 to 85, 90 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and dropping down no lower than 70 degrees at night. Warm and relatively humid as well. Especially during their growing season, during the wet season, it is extremely humid where they grow, and so they expect the same thing in cultivation. They can be somewhat acclimated to drier conditions, but for best pitcher production, you want them to be growing in moderate humidity. They also, because they are an open kind of grassland environment plant, they like a lot of light. So the more light you can give them, all the way up to full sun, the better. If you don't have acclimated leaves, you will see young leaves kind of burn and die off, but new leaves will be acclimated to that higher light level. Soil is, in the wild, these guys will grow in kind of sandy soils, so very loose, very dry. You can try and replicate that, or your standard Nepenthes mix usually works as well. So I use a 1-to-1 sphagnum, perlite, and cocoa chips. I might add a little bit more perlite and cocoa chips to make this a little more well draining and dry out easier in my humid conditions. But it's something that you kind of have to tweak to fit your conditions. Now again, this is a species that is quite threatened in the wild, and it's still very rare in cultivation, so make sure if you are purchasing this plant that you're receiving it from a reliable source. So I got this from the education director of the ICPS, International Carnivorous Plant Society. When he sells plants, it's usually, you can rely on them having come from a reliable source. But beware anything that is coming out of Indochina without a horticultural provenance, so without obviously having been produced in horticulture. If you're buying this plant from a grower or breeder in like the US or Europe, wherever you may be watching this, outside that environment, and you know that they've been growing it for a while, then that's usually a reliable source. And if you get this plant, try to make sure you grow it to your best ability and propagate it well so that this can become a more widespread species in cultivation, and reduce the desire of people to poach it from the wild so that the remaining truly tiny remnant populations of this species can be protected in the wild. Now that's about all that I have for that species. I will be doing a few more Indo-Chinese species and a couple similar species from other areas in Nepenthes range in the coming weeks. So if you enjoy educational videos like this, make sure to like the videos, leave comments below if you have questions on this. Watch all the way through, because the watch hours really help support the channel. It tells the algorithm that this channel should be supported, should be promoted. Make sure to subscribe, turn on the black bell so you don't miss any of the videos that might be coming up. And of course, if you'd like more information, there's the database and blog. I put up information on different species, write articles on my website at carltoncarnivores.com, and I'm always posting photos and videos and such on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and I have been doing TikTok, but TikTok has been having some issues recently, so we'll see how that goes. If you would like to support in a more financial manner, I do sell a lot of these plants on my website at carltoncarnivores.com, or I will also post things on eBay and such if you don't want to try and buy directly through me, although I will be the cheapest of those sources. You can also buy merch at our Teespring shop or become a donating member at patreon.com/hcarlton. Members there get early access to the videos, monthly access to the seed contests that I run, earliest notice when I'm releasing new plants and such on my website for sale. Or if you don't want to do a monthly subscription like that, you can always donate. They will allow single-time donations, sometimes through Patreon, but you can also do it through Ko-fi. All the links for these different things will be in the video description below, so don't worry about memorizing anything. But until next time, whichever plant I may be showing or wherever in the wild I may be filming things, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.